Revelation chapter 18, verses 3 and 4. Just starting in here, it says, "For all nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication." Now, of course, the her that's being referenced there is that city that's being referenced all through here, all through Revelation chapter 17. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. The her there is Rome. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." Okay, let's compare that with Jeremiah chapter 51. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 6. Okay, Jeremiah chapter 51, 6. And of course, we understand that the reference all the way through what we're reading there in Revelation chapter 18 is Babylon, which is Rome. So you'll notice that same thing showing up in Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 6. Babylon, flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her, that's Babylon, a recompense. All right, so my people is a reference to the Jews. But you can make a spiritual application to the Christian and say that the Christian needs to come out from Rome. At least if you want to make a spiritual application within the church age, because the doctrinal application of what you're reading is tribulational. But spiritual application, you can make the same application that if you're one of God's people, you need to come out of Rome. You need to come out of the Catholic Church. Now, this disclaimer can be out there, is that there are people that are saved inside the Roman Catholic Church. I would say I can't say them in terms of an equivalency, because I don't think that they're equivalent. But there's people that get saved reading an NIV or an ASV, right? There's enough gospel in a perverted Bible that somebody can get saved with an RSV or a CEV or any of those different things. But what I would tell somebody is that you can get saved with one of those Bibles. I could probably, or anybody in here who's kind of trained well enough, could take one of those Bibles and lead somebody to Christ with their own bad version. But you'll never grow with that Bible version, right? There's too much wrong with it for you to really grow. I'd say the same thing to somebody that is that's saved and inside the Roman Catholic Church. You're still saved. You're going to go to heaven when you die and all of that. But in terms of growth, in terms of you understanding and growing in any kind of deeper relationship with Jesus Christ, you're always going to be hampered by all the other lies that exist in that system, the same way you would with a bad version of the Bible, if that makes sense. Now, I wouldn't say that they're equivalent. I'd say it'd be far worse to stay in the Catholic Church than it is to just sit down with a bad version of the Bible. But the two are linked, right? Those bad versions of the Bible, they're Catholic Bibles. They're Catholic texts. The texts that they come from are literally called Vaticanus, right? You don't have to, that's not that big of a stretch to understand where those Bibles are coming out of, right? And so you don't have to go to the Catholic Church to have a Catholic Bible and even have a Catholic doctrine. And so he says to come out from her. All right? And so, of course, that's the sense in which Martin Luther took the passage. And this type of exposition is kind of typical of the beginning of the Reformation. Of course, in the Reformation, they're trying to get folks to come out from the Catholic Church, right? Martin Luther, he pins his 95 Thesis to Westminster Abbey and gives 95 reasons why you ought to leave the Catholic Church. For all of that, I'll say, if you're in here and you're a Baptist, as far as Baptist heritage goes, the Baptists didn't ever leave the Catholic Church because they were never in it. Not to say that there aren't people who were in the Catholic Church that didn't become Baptists, but as far as your Baptist doctrine, it wasn't something that was Catholic and then pulled away from it. It was never in it. Bible believers have always been persecuted by the Catholic Church. The Hussites, John Huss, they were persecuted and killed, tortured by the Catholic Church. The Bogomiles, Peter Waldo, right? Any of those guys. I think probably the most famous is going to be William Tyndale, right? William Tyndale was burned at the stake by the Roman Catholic Church for publishing the Bible in a language that people could read, right? There's just a whole long list of stuff that we could talk about. Go ahead.
Did the city of Rome used to be this called Babylon, or how?
Well, I mean, no. Rome was always Rome. There was a city called Babylon, but the Babylon that we're talking about here is Rome. Like if I pull up a map here, I can show you where Babylon used to be. Of course, Babylon is right over here in the Middle East. That's where it was originally built. But the Babylon that he's talking about here is Rome. And the reason that we know it's not that Babylon is because he's talking about that Babylon, and he says that it sits on 7 hills. That Babylon sits in the plain of Shinar. It didn't sit on any hills. It was on flat ground. All right? So what he's talking about is a city that sits on 7 hills that's connected with pagan worship, that proclaims itself to be something that it's not. It's involved in commercialism, in religion. So yeah, it's
Well, I was confused.
well, and if well, go over here to Revelation chapter 17, and it'll kind of make sense at least a little bit. If I do a good enough job of explaining it, hopefully. Revelation chapter 17, it gives you a really important word there in verse 5. Because the first word is mystery Babylon, right? We're not talking about that Babylon. Literally, we're talking about mystery Babylon. And what's a mystery? Mystery is something that's hidden. It's chameleon, right? It's quasi, right? So it's not overt. It's covert, right? And that's what the Roman Catholic Church is that it is mystery Babylon. Does that help out a little bit?
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, Martin Luther took that passage and like I said, is the type of exposition you get out of the Reformation. But the original context, back over there in Jeremiah chapter 51, even starting in verse 5, Jeremiah 51:5, it says, "For Israel hath not been forsaken, nor Judah of his God, of the Lord of hosts, though their land was filled with sin against the Holy One of Israel." Then we see verse 6, "Flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul." This is Jeremiah 51:6. "And be not cut off in her iniquity," that's Babylon's iniquity. "For this is the time of the Lord's vengeance. He will render unto her," that's Babylon, "a recompense." Verse 7, "Babylon hath been notice there it is again, a golden cup." Right? That's the symbol of Mystery Babylon. It also happens to be the symbol of the Roman Catholic Church. Right? The chalice. Right? The golden cup. Right? If you need a visual, you go back and watch, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, whatever. It's the golden cup that, the Roman soldier caught Jesus' blood in a cup, right? Isn't that the mythology? Right? So that's the cup, right? "Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. The nations have drunken of her wine." So she's connected with wine, a golden cup, and she's connected with wine. That's not a stretch at all, right? In the Roman Catholic Church, it's not grape juice like what we do around here. I mean, like when we take the Lord's Supper, it's probably Welch's or something, right? I'm trying to think of any other grape brands out there. Great value, Ocean Spray. I don't know what else is out there, right? I don't know how fancy we get, right? Hy-Vee brand, yeah, Old Orchard. Just not real Old Orchard, right? It's fine. But by the end of the quote unquote Lord's Supper in a Catholic church, the priest is smashed. You know why? Because he takes a drink before he gives you a drink. And then the next person comes up and he takes a drink and then he gives you a drink. And the next person comes up and he takes a drink and then he gives you a drink. Well, how many drinks you got by the end of your congregation there? Dude, he is 3 sheets to the wind. He's stoned, man. That stuff, we can laugh about it, but that's the state, right? That's what it is, all right?
It's worse on Christmas Eve service.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It says, and have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad, right? Catholicism is prolific for drunkenness, right? And, if the large part, I don't usually get too many problems in talking about this stuff. Granted, I'm not usually this direct, in talking to Roman Catholics, but it's usually, unfortunately, it's Bible believers who don't know anything about Roman Catholicism that get most upset about bashing Roman Catholicism. It's like, well, you don't know anything about it, right? If you knew, I imagine I could get more amens out of a bunch of saved Roman Catholics than I could out of most saved independent Baptists. Whenever it comes to talking about this stuff right here, listen, I'll tell you openly, a bunch of my favorite preachers of all time are former Roman Catholics, saved Roman Catholics. Dr. Ruckman, saved Roman Catholic. Brother Donovan, saved Roman Catholic. Brother Gipp, saved Roman Catholic. I'm trying to think of, that list I think keeps going on. Glenn Shunk, saved Roman Catholic. Some of the greatest preachers I've ever heard, saved Roman Catholics. They came out, they got saved and then they came out of the Catholic Church. You want to hear it, don't hear it from me, go listen to those guys. They'll tell you exactly what it is, right? All right. So anyway, Jeremiah chapter 51, 5-7, what you just read there is a reference to Israel getting away from Rome in the time period that we're talking about, in the tribulation, because Rome is going to turn against the Jew and wipe them out. And of course, at one point, now granted, I don't remember which pope we're on, but one of your past popes, Pope Paul, was making overtures to the Jew. But you can't forget that the Antichrist goes even further than that. He makes a peace treaty and signs a covenant with the Jew. That's the reason why a lot of the stuff that we're watching right now gets real interesting. And you say, well, how close are we? I have no idea. I don't know how close we are. Like, I don't know if what you're seeing on the news right now going on with Israel leads into some of this stuff. You don't know, I don't know. You don't know if it's going to escalate. You don't know if it's going to die down. You and I don't know I can't stand up here and tell you and say, hey, we're, because of what you saw in the news, I can tell you, man, we're real close. I can tell you, I just think we're real close to, regardless of what you see on the news, right? I just think that we're close, right? But I'm not going to say, hey, did you see Trey Yingst and what he said, over there in Israel? He said this, that means this. Like, no, we're not playing games where we're saying, this journalist said this and that lines up with this verse of scripture over here. I've seen guys do that. I've seen YouTubers do that, and they're looking at every little possible thing. And what they do is they end up getting a lot of Christians real worked up about something that might come to nothing, right? And the truth is that, listen, no man knows the day or the hour, and you know what you ought to do, regardless of what goes on in the news. You ought to be ready to fly, and until that happens, you ought to try to lead as many people to Christ as you can and live as close to Christ as you can. Live like the Lord's coming back in about 15 minutes. Okay?
Well, for 2,000 years, we thought we were close.
Right.
And nobody believed Noah for how many years?
Right, for 100 years. Yeah. So, yeah. If we look crazy in 10 years, so be it. But man, it's, I don't know what to tell you.
The flood did happen.
That's the thing. Eventually, the water did fall.
Yeah.
So you could say, well, you've all been talking about the rapture for 2,000 years. Yeah, and one day it's going to happen. And I think it'll be reasonably within your lifetime. But anyway, like I said, the Antichrist, he goes further than anything else that's going on. He makes a peace treaty and signs a covenant with the Jew, and then he breaks it. And you see that over in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. Daniel 9:27. And, been a little while now since we went through all the Daniel stuff, talking about a lot of this. In Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 is, he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Now, when we looked at that, we talked about that 1 week being 7 years. And in the midst of the week, okay, so 3.5 years in, he shall cause the sacrifice of the oblation to cease. Now, there's a lot there. If he's going to cause the sacrifice to cease, there has to have been sacrifices going on. So I can say this, is that there's still some time because there's no temple on the mount. And the Jews are not making sacrifices that I'm aware of. And a great question comes up all the time. What are the Jews doing with their sins? Right? If the Old Testament law is not done away with, if you're a Jew and you still have yourself under the Old Testament, what have you been doing with your sins for 2,000 years?
They're just not eating pork chops.
I was like,
Yeah,
man.
do more stuff than just abstain from pork.
And, that's why I feel like in a large extent the tribulation is as bad as it is. Consider this, that there was a time period of about 490 years where the Jews didn't observe the year of Jubilee. And so when you don't observe 400, and what the year of Jubilee was, is that every 7th year you were supposed to let the land rest. Well, you go 490 years of missing every 7th year, that adds up to 70 years. So whenever Babylon comes in, right, they make up the 70 years. And so I wonder, I don't take this too far, if the tribulation isn't, in a certain extent, that's 2,000 years of not making sacrifice. Not taking, now granted, their sacrifice was already paid for by Jesus Christ. But, still, they're not doing anything about their sins right now, even by their own law. Now granted, that penalty has already been paid if they'll just receive it. So anyway, coming back over here, but yeah, that's why I'd say you're close, but you're not. You're in the ballpark. There's no sacrifice being made. I think that that Dome of the Rock's got to move. A temple's got to be built. A sacrifice has to come back. And there's a whole lot of geopolitical hoops to jump through. Go ahead.
I mean, you think that the horrificness of the tribulation God's going to put all that wrath for missing all that?
I don't know, and I could be completely wrong about that, but it just seems, like the Lord remembers,
Right.
and He has a way of balancing the tab.
Yeah.
So now, anyway, that I may be way off on that, but it is something to think about. And it says, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. All right, so, don't kid yourself. Whenever a Roman Catholic college of cardinals or church or bishop makes an agreement with the Protestants or Jews, they make it with their fingers crossed, under the Jesuit proposition that the end justifies the means. Under the particular philosophy which Loyola taught, he said, was this: any Roman pope can promise life, liberty, peace, and tolerance to a Protestant or Jew and kill him within a year with a clear conscience. That's by their own Roman law. You can make peace and then you can break it within a year and not have any repercussions religiously. Go ahead.
There's a lot of similarities in that and Muslim.
I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I've got that stuff pulled up. But the Roman Catholic teaching is that as long as it is for the glory of God and the Roman Catholic Church, it's right, even if it's a lie. And no Roman Catholic is obligated to tell the truth if it will hurt his church. This was apparent in the case of the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. You don't get the real story of this from the day Lincoln was shot by a pro-Roman Catholic writer. You should give some diligent study to things like The Rise and Fall of the Roman Catholic Church by a guy by the name of Peterson, which was an objective account of Lincoln's assassination. And from it, you'll get an insight into what actually took place. but a Catholic can lie with a clear conscience if it'll honor God and glorify the church. That's the Jesuit teaching. And so somebody brings up, well, something similar about Islam. All right, so this is what I pulled up on Islam. It's amazing. So the assumption, I remember, thinking about the tribulation, how is there going to be one world religion when you've got, we get Catholicism, but how are you going to get Islam roped into that thing? You know what you start to find out? There's not a whole lot of difference. The major differences, are negotiable, right? This is written by a guy named Asma bint Yazid, narrated that the messenger of Allah said this: "It is not lawful to lie, except in 3 cases. Something the man tells his wife to please her, to lie during war, and to lie in order to bring peace between the people." And that is Jami at Tamur, anyway, 1938. It's also narrated by Sunni Muslim. He said, "A liar is not one who tries to bring reconciliation amongst people and speaks good in order to avert dispute, or he conveys good. Lying is the source of all kinds of evil and mischief, and a major sin. However, there are some instances in which Islam permits lying." And this is all from their stuff. This is not what some Christians said about Islam. There are some instances in which Islam permits lying if that serves a greater purpose or wards off a greater harm. Even in these instances, it is advisable not to lie. Adopt a strategy by using statements that have multiple meanings, half-truths, and could serve the purpose of the demand. The 3 cases explained in the Hadith, that's their holy books, are these: when a man speaks to his wife or a wife to her husband concerning matters that will increase the love between them, i.e. to show to his wife more love for her than he actually possesses in his heart. Or to say other than the reality concerning the food, etc., to please her. Second, and this is the one I want to make special close attention to, at times of war, as a tactic to demoralize the enemy and win the war. And then the third is when a person is intermediating in order to bring about reconciliation between disputing parties, i.e. to tell one party the other said such a good thing about him, even though he did not hear such from him. Now let's talk about to be able to lie in times of war, in terms of Islam. This is what their material says about jihad. Jihad, from reliance of the traveler, Shafite Islamic law means to war against non-Muslims, to establish the religion of Islam. Also understood as just war or holy war, no other definition of jihad has ever existed at any point in history in any authoritative Islamic law. When Muslims cannot fight the jihad against non-Muslims, meaning that, they're here in America and, they're not allowed to fight the war here. Okay? When Muslims cannot fight the jihad against non-Muslims, they are required to fight with the pen or their mouth. They can lie. If even this is not possible, Islam requires them to fight with their heart and hate/despise the unbelievers for the sake of Allah. Islam has been in a state of jihad since Muhammad. So, in terms of how a Muslim views things, it is completely right in his mind. My dad does, he's got a trucking business, gets called all the time by a bunch of these guys wanting him to haul stuff for him, and he won't do it. And he's told him, he said, listen, your book says that you can lie to me anytime about anything. Why would I want to do business with you? Right? And because even in their own state, if they can't fight jihad legitimately, they can do it with their mouth and with the pen. So that puts everything at a complete state of absolute distrust right on the front of it. And so you see, there's those two things between Roman Catholicism and Islam go hand in hand. Both of them give themselves allowances to lie straight to your face if it will advance Islam or advance the Roman Catholic Church, or to keep it from hurting Islam or keep it from hurting the Roman Catholic Church. They're the two sides of the exact same coin. All right. All right. The verse back over here in Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. Now, granted, you may not know a lot of Muslims, but I'll say it in the same sense that I've said all the stuff about Roman Catholicism. Well, that's not true of this Muslim guy I know. I didn't say it was true of that Muslim guy you know. I said it was true of Islam. In the same way that I'm not saying that all of this is true about your Roman Catholic neighbor or friend or relative. I said it's true of Roman Catholicism. Okay, there's a difference. Revelation chapter 18, verse 4, it says, "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, that ye receive not of her plagues." That verse in Revelation chapter 18:4 is addressed to Israel directly during the tribulation. And of course, indirectly, it can refer to anybody who's a member of the Roman Catholic Church. That is, get out and get out as quickly as you can. That's the thing the Catholic priests hate, Christians who proselyte people from their church. Priests hate Christians who witness to Catholics to try to show them the errors of the Babylonian prostitute. And that's why they say, you've got your religion and I've got mine. They'll end the conversation there. Well, you've got your religion and I've got mine. I won't bother you and you don't bother me. What he really means is that he's terrified of the truth and is hiding behind a refuge of lies and can't stand to be exposed. And that's the state of it, because, listen, I was watching a deal and there was, I guess, an evangelical youth pastor or something like that. And he was talking to his pastor and he's like, I think Roman Catholicism is right. And the pastor was like, and this is, again, a big non-denominational, devotional fest. And the pastor was like, okay, we'll do a Bible study on it. And he let the guy preach to his church all this stuff. He said, we're just not going to talk about the Roman Catholic Church. And then it gets to the end of the thing, and he's like, yeah, and he talks about where in his Bible he was reading. And he guesses as to where in his Bible he was reading. I'll tell you, it was 3 books: Matthew, Acts, and Hebrews. I was like, you idiot. I was like, yeah, if you're going to get off on some doctrine, you're going to get it out of those 3 books. That's why we talk about it all the time through here. You got to rightly divide the word of truth. And if you don't rightly divide it, you can come out a Roman Catholic. Right? But if you rightly divide it and you read the whole book, you'll come out of Roman Catholicism. Anyway. All right. We'll get started here a little bit with verses 5 and 6. Revelation chapter 18, verse 5 and 6. It says, "For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double, according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled to her double." That's quite a thing right there. Double, double, double. You compare that to Revelation chapter 17, verse 4, just a little bit over there. It says, "And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of what? Full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication." That gives you the context of what's in the cup, right? And what it is that you're supposed to fill to her, and how much of it you're supposed to fill. So whenever you go back up there, reward her even as she rewarded you, double unto her double, according to her works, in the cup which she hath filled to her double. So what he tells them to fill up, he said, you fill up abominations and filthiness of her fornication, double it up. And that's what she gets back. She gets double what she gave. That's quite a thing. That's the vengeance of God coming. Give her back twice as much as she gave you. Over here in Revelation chapter 18, verse 5. So you've got the Catholic Church is going to reap what it sows. And the Catholic Church knows how, we've mentioned this a little bit. I know Miss Brenda Miss Brenda brought it up, but I wasn't ready to kind of hit on it yet. The Catholic Church does know how a sinner is to be saved. They know how to lead somebody to Christ. But they won't tell anybody until one moment, and it's at the last rites. At the last rites, they'll lead somebody to Christ, but they won't lead anybody to Christ until the last rites. They won't tell anybody to trust on Jesus Christ as their Savior until the last rites. That's it. You can't. That is as much truth as a Roman Catholic will ever give a person is whenever they're about to die. And I guess that you could maybe reference that as a saving grace of it, but they'll lie to them all the way up until their last breath. And that's evil. Revelation chapter 18, verse 6, like we saw there, for 5,000 years, that's what she's done, and she's going to have to drink of her own cup double. Go to Isaiah chapter 47. Isaiah chapter 47. So I guess if somebody's listening to this and you're in the Roman Catholic Church and you want to get saved, just go to the priest and see if he'll give you your last rites. You get the gospel at least then. Isaiah chapter 47 verse 1, and then leave. All right, Isaiah chapter 47 verse 1. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground, there is no throne. O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. Look at verse 4. As for our Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel. Sit thou silent, and get thee into darkness, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called the Lady of Kingdoms. I was wroth with my people, I have polluted mine inheritance, and given them into thine hand. Thou didst show them no mercy upon the ancient, hast thou very heavily laid thy yoke. And thou saidst, I will be a lady forever. This is a conversation that Babylon, the Roman Catholic Church, is having, and it's tribulational. Thou saidst, okay, that's Rome, I shall be a lady forever, a woman that sits on 7 hills, Revelation 17. So that thou didst not lay these things to thy heart, neither didst remember the latter end of it. Therefore hear now this, thou that art given to pleasures, that dwellest carelessly, that sayest in thy heart, I am, and none else beside me. Right? You ever talked, what's the claim of the Roman Catholic Church? We are the one true church. Right? And everybody's got to come back to the mother church. Right? I've heard of Protestants go back, say, well, the Catholics, we all came out from the Catholic Church. I think we all ought to go back. Right? They're the one true. The Catholic told me they're the one true church. Like, that doesn't mean you got to believe them. All right? I am, and none else besides me. I shall not sit as a widow, neither shall I know the loss of children. But she does. But these 2 things shall come to thee. Verse 9. In a moment, in one day, the loss of children and widowhood, they shall come upon thee in their perfection, for the multitude of thy sorceries, and for the great abundance of thine enchantments. That's what it's associated with. It's associated with devils. All right? And you can go on down. Verse 12 will talk about enchantments and sorceries, and verse 13 will talk about astrologers and stargazers and all that other kind of stuff that goes with it. But anyway, we'll stop there. We'll pick it up in verses 7 through 14 next time. Any questions before we close? Go ahead.
Something real quick about the Muslim thing.
Yeah.
They believe that any land that they place a mosque on is theirs.
So
Not any property, any land. So in their mind, America is already theirs.
America is theirs because they have a mosque on it.
They have a mosque.
So not even like an embassy where the ground that the mosque sits is theirs.
No.
The country.
Correct.
The country that a mosque sits on is theirs. That's them planting their flag on it. Very interesting. Very interesting. So yeah, they've already claimed it.
And there are places in Minneapolis right now, the Minneapolis